Karoline Leavitt, a rising star in American conservative politics, has quickly made her mark as a fierce advocate for President Donald Trump's policies. Born in Atkinson, New Hampshire, in 1997, Leavitt's background isn't one of political royalty. Instead, she was raised in a family with strong ties to the community where they ran a local business. This early experience helped shape her worldview, emphasizing hard work, independence, and a deep commitment to her values. Her political career began in earnest when she joined President Trump's administration as an assistant press secretary under Kayleigh McEnany in 2020. Leavitt's sharp communication skills and no-nonsense approach soon won her recognition. She was a regular on conservative media outlets where she passionately defended the administration's policies. However, it wasn't just her ability to articulate her views that garnered attention, it was also her unwavering commitment to the ideals of the MAGA movement that helped her build a solid reputation. Leavitt's experience wasn't confined to media appearances. She later served as the communications director for Congresswoman Elise Stefanik and ran for Congress in New Hampshire's 1st District. Though she didn't win the seat in 2022, her campaign further solidified her status as one of the more formidable young conservative voices in American politics. In January 2025, she was appointed as the 36th White House press secretary. At just 27 years old, she became the youngest person ever to hold this prestigious position. Her appointment was widely celebrated among conservatives who viewed her as a voice that could bridge the gap between the Trump administration and the younger generation of Republicans. However, it was Leavitt's ability to handle media pressure and answer tough questions that caught the attention of not just conservatives, but her critics as well. The media quickly realized that this was no ordinary press secretary. Leavitt's responses were often sharp, well-crafted, and directly addressed the issues at hand, earning her respect even among some political analysts who didn't always agree with her policies. In contrast, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, commonly known as AOC, had established herself as a formidable figure in American politics, but from an entirely different ideological perspective. AOC's rise came as a part of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. She became a household name after her stunning victory over a longtime incumbent in New York's 14th Congressional District in 2018 at just 29 years old. Her political approach was radically different from Leavitt's. While Leavitt was pushing for conservative values and economic policies, AOC was advocating for ambitious programs like the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. AOC's fiery rhetoric and willingness to challenge the status quo gained her a massive following among younger voters, especially those frustrated with what they perceived as corporate-driven policies. She quickly became the face of progressivism in the United States, earning praise from liberal circles but also facing fierce criticism from conservatives. One of her key targets was President Trump and his administration, whom she frequently criticized for policies that she believed were detrimental to working-class Americans and the environment. In early 2025, Leavitt and AOC found themselves in the middle of a public clash over a new bill aimed at addressing healthcare reform in America. The disagreement would ignite a battle not just between two individuals, but between two starkly different visions for the future of the country. Leavitt, speaking on behalf of the Trump administration, argued that the proposed reforms were fiscally irresponsible and would burden American taxpayers. She stated that the best way to improve healthcare was to promote free market solutions and reduce government intervention. Americans deserve healthcare that is affordable, but not at the cost of bankrupting our country, Leavitt declared at a press conference, calling for a more pragmatic approach to healthcare. On the other hand, AOC's vision was rooted in the belief that healthcare should be a universal right. She spoke out against what she described as the greed of pharmaceutical companies and the insurance industry, arguing that they were prioritizing profits over the well-being of Americans. She staunchly advocated for Medicare for All, which she claimed would provide comprehensive healthcare to every American at no cost to them. As the battle over healthcare reform raged on, both Leavitt and AOC became the faces of their respective movements. The media, eager to highlight the generational and ideological divide between these two women, began framing their interactions as a microcosm of the broader political struggle in America. While AOC was gaining support from the progressive left, Leavitt was becoming a champion for conservatives who were frustrated by what they saw as the growing influence of socialism in American politics. Leavitt's ability to hold her ground and defend the administration's positions against AOC's progressive agenda would soon be put to the test in a highly publicized debate. The stage was set for what would become a defining moment for both women, one that would demonstrate not just their political acumen, but their ability to handle intense public scrutiny and media pressure. As the healthcare reform debate intensified, the stage for a public confrontation between Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, was set. The venue, a televised debate where the two women would square off on the issue of healthcare, specifically the merits and drawbacks of a government-run healthcare system versus free market reforms. For Leavitt, the debate was an opportunity to solidify her standing as a leading voice in the conservative movement. She had become known for her ability to dismantle arguments from the left, and this debate with AOC was seen as the perfect chance to showcase her sharp wit and policy knowledge. AOC's ideas may sound good on paper, but they're dangerous, Leavitt said ahead of the debate. We cannot afford to implement a system that will bankrupt this country. We need a solution that respects the principles of fiscal responsibility and individual freedom. AOC, on the other hand, was ready to defend her progressive stance with her characteristic passion. She had become adept at engaging in high-stakes debates and knew that this encounter would be no different. This is about ensuring that every American has access to healthcare as a basic human right. AOC fired back. We cannot continue to allow corporations to dictate who gets care based on their ability to pay. The time for change is now, and we must act boldly to create a fair system. The night of the debate, the nation tuned in. Social media platforms were abuzz with anticipation as viewers eagerly awaited the exchange between the two powerful women. What followed would become a spectacle of political theater that would dominate headlines for weeks. As the debate began, the tension was palpable. Leavitt was calm, collected, and well-prepared, her responses punctuated by precise statistics and logical arguments. The reality is, Medicare for all is not the solution, she argued. It's a government overreach that would drastically increase taxes, hurt small businesses, and erode the quality of care. Instead, we should focus on market-based solutions that allow competition, innovation, and patient choice. AOC, meanwhile, was unrelenting in her defense of universal healthcare. It's time for the United States to join the rest of the developed world in providing healthcare to all, she said. For too long, we've allowed insurance companies and big pharma to profit off the suffering of the American people. We must create a system where healthcare is a right, not a privilege. The debate quickly escalated as both women traded barbs and attempted to outdo each other in highlighting the flaws of the other's argument. AOC took every opportunity to criticize the GOP's healthcare record, pointing out how millions of Americans were uninsured or underinsured, and how corporate greed was preventing the healthcare system from serving the people. Leavitt, in turn, countered by pointing out the inefficiencies and high costs associated with government-run programs, highlighting how they often led to longer wait times, poorer outcomes, and stifled innovation. We can't just ignore the realities of a bloated bureaucracy, Leavitt emphasized. We need reforms that encourage innovation and improve the quality of care for all Americans, not just more government control. The tension between the two women reached a boiling point when AOC accused Leavitt of ignoring the needs of working-class Americans in favor of protecting the wealthy and corporate interests. You don't understand what it's like for families who have to choose between paying for medication or putting food on the table, AOC said, her voice rising in frustration. Leavitt, unfazed, shot back with a biting response. And you, Congresswoman, don't understand the value of hard work and personal responsibility, Leavitt retorted. You're pushing a radical agenda that will hurt small businesses and the very people you claim to represent. We need policies that empower people, not make them dependent on government handouts. As the debate continued, it became clear that the divide between the two women was not just ideological, but also personal. AOC's progressive rhetoric clashed with Leavitt's conservative values, and both women became increasingly determined to prove that their vision for the future of America was the right one. The stakes were high, and each woman was prepared to go to great lengths to defend her beliefs. The public's reaction to the debate was mixed. Supporters of AOC praised her passionate defense of universal healthcare, while conservatives hailed Leavitt's calm and reasoned approach. The media coverage was relentless, with pundits on both sides dissecting every word, gesture, and reaction from the two women. The debate became more than just a discussion about healthcare, it became a symbol of the broader ideological battle taking place in the United States. In the days that followed, social media erupted with commentary on the debate. AOC's supporters hailed her as the voice of a new generation of progressives, while Leavitt's followers celebrated her as the defender of conservative principles and fiscal responsibility. Both women had made their points, but the question remained, who had won? While the debate didn't provide a clear winner, it was clear that both women had left a lasting impression. Leavitt had proven herself as a formidable opponent, one who could stand toe-to-toe with one of the most prominent progressive voices in American politics. AOC, meanwhile, had solidified her place as a leading figure in the fight for universal health care. As the debate ended and the media frenzy began, both Leavitt and AOC knew that this was just the beginning. The battle over healthcare reform was far from over, and the war of ideas between the conservative and progressive wings of American politics would continue to shape the country's future. In the days following the heated debate, the nation remained divided. The media's coverage was extensive, with pundits and political analysts weighing in on who had won the clash between Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. However, as much as the debate was framed in terms of a battle between two strong personalities, it quickly became apparent that the issues at hand were much bigger than just the two women. The ideological rift between conservatives and progressives was on full display, and the debate only served to amplify the divide. Leavitt's camp, which had been rooting for her from the start, rallied around their champion. Conservative commentators hailed her for standing her ground and articulating the core values of the right wing, namely fiscal responsibility, free market solutions, and a limited role for government in people's lives. They praised her ability to remain composed under pressure and her skilled use of facts to dismantle AOC's arguments. Leavitt showed exactly what America needs: pragmatic leadership, not pie-in-the-sky promises, one conservative commentator said. On the other hand, AOC's supporters found strength in her passionate defense of Medicare for all, seeing her as the voice of a new generation of progressives determined to address the systemic inequalities in healthcare. AOC didn't just present a policy proposal, she presented a moral argument, said one liberal analyst. She's fighting for the basic human right of healthcare, and Leavitt was just parroting talking points from the status quo. For AOC, the debate marked a pivotal moment in her political career. She was widely regarded as the face of progressive change, particularly when it came to issues like healthcare, climate change, and economic justice. The debate may not have gone as she had hoped, but her defenders saw it as a reinforcement of her position as a fierce advocate for the disenfranchised. However, the pressure of defending such sweeping changes was beginning to take its toll. The push for Medicare for all, in particular, was facing significant political challenges, with several moderate Democrats now hesitant to fully embrace the proposal. As for Leavitt, her victory in the debate didn't just bolster her career, it also positioned her as a key player in the future of conservative politics. Her calm, collected demeanor and sharp rebuttals had earned her praise from both sides of the aisle, even from some Republicans who were typically wary of combative rhetoric. Many now saw her as a rising star in the GOP, a voice of reason who could bridge the gap between traditional conservatives and the more populist elements of the Trump movement. Leavitt's refusal to back down in the face of AOC's progressive firestorm only solidified her status as one of the more formidable figures in the Republican Party. But even as the praise poured in, tensions between Leavitt and AOC began to escalate. Both women were determined not to let the debate end in a stalemate. Leavitt, with her growing influence in the White House, took to social media to continue her war of words. "We can't afford to let leftist ideologies destroy the fabric of our nation," she tweeted. "Medicare for all is not the answer. It's a pipe dream that will bankrupt the American people." AOC, never one to back down from a challenge, responded in kind. "The real pipe dream is thinking that the rich and powerful will ever look out for the working class," she tweeted. "It's time for bold action, not empty promises from those who only want to protect the interests of the wealthy." The war of words quickly shifted into full-blown political theater. While both women were already leading figures in their respective movements, the debate had elevated them to new heights of national prominence. Their ideological clash was no longer just about healthcare, it was about the future direction of America. As the months went by, their rhetoric became increasingly pointed and personal, drawing in their respective supporters and fueling the fire of political polarization. In Washington, the debate over healthcare reform continued to dominate the legislative agenda. Leavitt's influence within the White House allowed her to push back against the progressive push for Medicare for all, securing the support of key GOP senators and members of Congress. Meanwhile, AOC doubled down on her call for a single-payer system, leveraging her strong social media presence and grassroots support to rally the progressive base. The battle over healthcare reform was far from over, and both women knew that their ideological war would define the 2024 elections. The media continued to cover every word, every tweet, and every interview that Leavitt and AOC gave. Journalists and political commentators seized on the animosity between the two women as emblematic of the larger ideological divide in the country. On cable news, talk show hosts and pundits played clips from the debate over and over again, dissecting every moment of the confrontation. The constant media cycle made it clear that this was more than just a political debate. It was a cultural moment. In the days leading up to the next major healthcare vote in Congress, the tension between Leavitt and AOC reached new heights. Rumors swirled that the two women would face off again, this time in a live televised interview that would give them another opportunity to present their cases directly to the American people. The thought of another high-stakes exchange sent political insiders into a frenzy. Would Leavitt continue to dominate, or would AOC find a way to flip the script? As the country watched, it was clear that the fight between Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was far from over. This wasn't just about healthcare anymore, it was a battle for the soul of American politics, and each woman was prepared to fight tooth and nail for the future they envisioned. Their personal animosity was a reflection of the growing division in the country where every issue from healthcare to the economy had become a battlefield for ideological warfare. The political world braced itself for the next chapter in the battle between Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. The news had just broken that the two women would sit down for a live, primetime interview to discuss their positions on healthcare and the broader ideological divide that had come to define their political careers. This would be more than just another debate, it would be the ultimate confrontation, a chance for both women to defend their beliefs to the American public in front of millions of viewers. As the day of the interview approached, anticipation reached a fever pitch. The media outlets were abuzz with speculation on what each woman would bring to the table. Would Leavitt maintain her composed, policy-focused approach, or would she let her emotions rise as AOC's progressive firepower bore down on her? And how would AOC respond? She had always been unafraid to confront her critics head-on, but in the face of Leavitt's rising influence within the Republican Party, would she be able to hold her ground? The interview was set to take place on one of the most watched political talk shows in the country, and the stakes could not have been higher. With both women representing the two largest factions of American politics, their words had the power to shift the political landscape for months to come. The host, a well-known journalist with a reputation for fair and balanced questioning, was ready for the fireworks. When the cameras began rolling, the two women took their seats, AOC with her signature vibrant energy dressed in a tailored blazer, her trademark red lipstick bright and bold, and Leavitt with her cool, calculated presence, donning a classic business suit that reflected her pragmatic approach to politics. The host introduced the segment, setting the tone for what promised to be a clash of ideologies. "I want to thank both Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and Karoline Leavitt for being here tonight," the host began. "This is an unprecedented opportunity for our viewers to hear directly from two of the most prominent voices in American politics. Tonight, we're going to talk about healthcare, the economy, and the future of our country. Let's start with healthcare. Congresswoman Leavitt, you've been a staunch opponent of Medicare for all. Why do you think it's the wrong approach?" Leavitt leaned forward, her voice confident and measured as she began her response. "Thank you for having me. I've always been clear about my position. Medicare for all is a dangerous idea that will destroy the American healthcare system. It's a massive government overreach that will lead to higher taxes, lower quality care, and a crushing burden on our economy. We need to move toward market-based reforms like expanding health savings accounts and allowing people to shop for insurance across state lines. Those are the solutions that will lower costs, increase competition, and give Americans the freedom to choose the care that works for them." AOC, not missing a beat, shot back. "I have to respectfully disagree. What's dangerous is allowing insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies to make decisions about people's health. Too many Americans are dying because they can't afford the care they need. We need a system where healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Medicare for all will ensure that every person, regardless of income, has access to the care they deserve. The host turned to AOC, recognizing the tension that had already begun to build between the two women. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, you've made the argument that healthcare is a fundamental right. But critics say that Medicare for all could cost trillions of dollars and leave taxpayers footing the bill. How do you respond to that concern? AOC's eyes locked on the host as she responded, her voice steady and firm. It's a valid question, but the reality is the current system is already costing Americans a fortune. We spend more on healthcare than any other country, and yet we don't get better outcomes. The wealthy and the corporations are making huge profits while working families struggle to afford basic healthcare. Medicare for all is an investment in the American people. It will save lives, reduce costs in the long run, and ensure that no one is left behind. The costs of inaction are far higher than the cost of implementing a system that works for everyone. Leavitt, maintaining her poise, raised her hand slightly as if to emphasize her next point. The problem with that argument, Congresswoman, is that you're ignoring the realities of how government-run programs work. They become bloated, inefficient, and unaffordable. Look at what's happening with Social Security and Medicare as it is. The numbers don't add up. If we want to improve healthcare, we should focus on creating a competitive, market-driven system that puts patients and providers in control, not bureaucrats. The two women's back and forth was rapid and intense. The host attempted to steer the conversation toward a more balanced discussion, but it was clear that neither Leavitt nor AOC was willing to give an inch. Both were firmly entrenched in their views, and they had no intention of letting the other sway them. The debate continued with back-and-forth exchanges on the role of government, corporate influence in healthcare, and the future of American society. But as the interview wore on, it became clear that the personal animosity between the two women was growing. Leavitt's calm, measured responses stood in stark contrast to AOC's passionate rhetoric, and the contrast between their approaches to politics became even more pronounced. At one point, the conversation veered into a more personal territory. AOC, visibly frustrated, turned to Leavitt. You talk about the free market, Karoline, but I'm sure you know as well as I do that the free market doesn't work for working people. You and I come from different worlds. While you've had the privilege of a life of comfort and opportunity, millions of Americans are struggling to get by. Your policies don't address their pain. Leavitt, unfazed, responded with a sharp retort. I may come from a different world, but that doesn't mean I don't care about the American people. In fact, it's because I care so deeply about our country's future that I'm fighting for policies that will lead to real, sustainable solutions. It's easy to talk about utopian ideals, but those ideas have consequences. The American people deserve more than just good intentions, they deserve a system that works. As the interview continued, it became clear that this was no longer just about healthcare, it was about the future of the country. Leavitt and AOC had come to represent the two starkly different visions for America, one grounded in conservative principles of limited government and individual responsibility, and the other in progressive values of equality and universal rights. The interview between Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, had already become a defining moment in American politics. The intensity of their exchange, combined with the personal undercurrents, made it clear that their ideological clash was emblematic of the broader divisions within the country. As the show aired, it quickly garnered millions of viewers, and within hours, the clip was trending on social media. The commentary surrounding the event continued for days as both sides claimed victory. But as the dust settled, it was clear that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The immediate aftermath of the debate was marked by a surge in public interest, both in terms of the policies discussed and the political personalities of Leavitt and AOC. Within her own party, AOC's supporters rallied around her, proud of her unwavering commitment to progressive ideals. Social media was flooded with hashtags like #MedicareForAll and #FightForThePeople, and AOC's supporters hailed her as the voice of reason in a political system that was, in their view, increasingly dominated by corporate interests and right-wing policies. Meanwhile, Leavitt's victory in the interview was celebrated by conservatives who saw it as proof that their vision of limited government and a market-driven economy was the right path forward. Conservative figures across social media platforms shared clips of her poised responses and sharp critiques of AOC's policies, praising her for her calm and measured approach. #conservative leadership began trending as a symbol of Leavitt's rising prominence within the Republican Party. For Leavitt, the aftermath of the interview was a boon to her career. The national attention she received from the interview solidified her place as one of the party's leading voices. She was invited onto multiple conservative talk shows where she used her newfound platform to further press her case against Medicare for all and other progressive policies. Her supporters praised her for representing the values of everyday Americans and for holding AOC accountable for what they viewed as impractical, overly ambitious proposals. However, it wasn't just her supporters who took notice. As the 2024 election cycle began to heat up, the political establishment started paying closer attention to Leavitt. The Republican Party, always on the lookout for fresh faces who could energize the base and present a strong challenge to the growing influence of the progressive left, began to position Leavitt as one of the party's most promising future leaders. She was seen as a potential candidate for higher office, with some speculating that she might even challenge for the vice presidency or a prominent cabinet role in the future. On the flip side, AOC's supporters were not as quick to dismiss the impact of the interview. While many liberals continued to champion her progressive stance, some began to question whether her approach, particularly in terms of healthcare, had become a liability in the political landscape. AOC's passionate defense of Medicare for all had energized the left, but it had also alienated moderates, some of whom felt that the proposal was unrealistic and could doom the Democrats' chances of reclaiming the White House in 2024. Progressive commentators took to their platforms defending AOC's vision for universal healthcare and stressing that the debate was a necessary step in pushing for bold reform. But it was clear that the clash with Leavitt had opened up a chasm within the Democratic Party, one that pitted progressives against moderates. As the party prepared for the next election cycle, the question of how to balance these competing factions became even more pressing. The split within the Democratic Party wasn't the only fallout from the debate. The media continued to pore over every aspect of the interview, analyzing body language, tone, and the finer points of the arguments made. Political analysts dissected the performance of both women, attempting to gauge which side had come out on top. But in truth, the real battle was far from over. The debate had only highlighted the deep divides in the country, and in many ways, it had set the stage for the political struggles to come. The growing tensions between the progressive left and the conservative right meant that more showdowns were inevitable. Leavitt's presence in the Republican Party continued to rise, with more appearances scheduled on national stages. She took every opportunity to position herself as a voice of reason and fiscal responsibility. Meanwhile, AOC continued her work in Congress, fighting for policies she believed were necessary to address the deep inequalities in the system. As the election cycle drew nearer, both women knew that this was just the beginning of their political journeys. In Washington, both women began to prepare for the long road ahead. Leavitt's continued involvement in the White House's agenda gave her even more visibility, allowing her to advocate for conservative positions on issues ranging from tax reform to national security. AOC, for her part, continued to gather support for her progressive platform, using her powerful voice to inspire a new generation of activists and voters who were determined to bring about change. The media frenzy surrounding the debate between Leavitt and AOC didn't just end with the interview, it was a microcosm of the larger political battle playing out across the country. The forces of conservatism and progressivism were clashing in new and dramatic ways, and the outcome of these ideological battles would shape the future of the nation. As 2024 approached, it was clear that Karoline Leavitt and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez were destined to remain central figures in the national conversation. Their paths would continue to intersect, whether through debate, policy proposals, or personal confrontations. But one thing was certain, the political world was watching closely, and the stakes had never been higher.